Hi, everyone. I'm Steven Stoneberg, CFO and COO of Bittrex Global, and the host of our video AMA today, where we are featuring xSigma. And our guest is Alex Lebed, who is the CTO of xSigma. Alex, thanks for joining us today. The Bittrex Global team is excited about our partnership with xSigma and glad to have the opportunity on our AMA today to answer some questions from both the Bittrex Global community and sort of the broader crypto community. So, Alex.
Well, thank you, Steven. Thank you for having me here in the interview. Well, happy to answer questions which might be like our community might wondering what's going on between xSigma and Bittrex. So happy to cover everything. What was?
Well, I think we'll get let's perfect. Let's just dive right into it. So, I think the first question from the community to kick things off: can you tell us about your background and the project team? Also, I was reading, of course, your materials last night. I saw that you're owned by a publicly listed NASDAQ company. So if you could talk a bit about that too, that's interesting.
All right. Well, as for myself, I have a math degree from Moscow State University. So I was in a CS national team. After that, started working in Facebook. Moved towards being a private consultant, worked after that as a SD2 in Amazon, well, software engineer basically. And in 2017, I joined underground blockchain crypto anarchy club called Decentral in Vancouver, very famous place. They have created the first Bitcoin ATM, as far as I remember. And from there, I joined kind of like movement of a decentralized blockchain, like a decentralized revolution, how we call it, and was there full-time since then. We also opened, like not we, but Decentral participate in a decentralized camp in Burning Man, everything about decentralization, about fighting over censorship, etc., etc. And it was quite a ride. And as for xSigma, well, this is a project owned by xSigma Labs. So structurally, it looks like this. There is a ZK international team, or international company, a corporation, which is NASDAQ traded entity. And this entity happened to have xSigma.com lab. So it's essentially an R&D department of this organization, where we're free to experiment with blockchain solutions as much as we would like. So there is not that much restrictions on what we can or what we cannot do. And one of those projects, our first project, was xSigma DEX. So it's essentially a stablecoin, a decentralized exchange that helps to facilitate trading on assets called stablecoins, which are essentially dollars on a blockchain as a kind of like a first pairs. And we are moving from here towards a bigger market, towards a more diversified presence on a different side chains as a Binance, Smart Chain, Polkadot, Polygon, etc. So structurally, xSigma Labs owns, like xSigma lab owned by ZK International. So it's not my company. I'm just a hired CTO, and our team constitutes, what's the English word, of quite a diverse set of developers and specialists. Starts from like marketing kinds of backend developers as myself. Is it what you asked for?
So just to level set, so we have ZK International, which is a NASDAQ listed company, owns xSigma Labs, which owns this project. And the project team brought in as professionals to kind of build out and experiment with blockchain. So it's interesting because you talked about why the xSigma name was chosen, and that was sort of our next question. But I think it's interesting. So you have a publicly traded company that's owning a blockchain lab that's getting into DeFi. So that in some ways seems to be, DeFi is all about getting away from that. I agree with you. I think one of the big problems with DeFi is that there is no oversight or regulation. So just because you're decentralized doesn't mean you want to have no oversight. So how have you sort of bridge the two together, and sort of what's been the reaction from the community with having that kind of a setup?
Yeah, this is a good question. So basically, it's a de facto standard. When a corporation start working with blockchain, usually it means what is some kind of like a privacy intranet solution, right? Especially inside of financial organizations. So while it's a blockchain on paper, it's no way decentralized. No way it's something that everyone outside of this kind of whitelisted set of entities can use. What we in xSigma do in our hand, it's totally like legit kind of first-class DeFi thing. So it's based on Ethereum. It's completely decentralized. We haven't deployed all contracts. It's very important to understand what project is very much still in development. So in terms of a voting mechanism, we literally just roll up this mechanism of a snapshot page yesterday actually, and we'll have a voting tomorrow in the first proposal, which is super unusual for corporations, because what corporations usually do is something that kind of fits in the immediate business process, which is hardly DeFi, where D stands for decentralized. So here we do a little different story. So ZK International experiment with solutions back in 2018 to do like Internet of Things into the existing business solutions. So right now, those experiments which we do right now is a stablecoin DEX, possibly a stablecoin NFT platform, which will be announced soon, are like really kind of like a decentralized, where D stands for, like DeFi, where D stands for decentralization. And there are quite a lot of challenges from a regulatory point of view, because you very public, you're Nasdaq traded, you on the eyes of all regulators. So we have like very kind of like a strict set of things which we can and cannot especially say, and it's quite a work to deal with all these lawyers and organizations in order to kind of bridge the gap between classical finance of Nasdaq. Well, at least from customer point of view, because like users who buy this ZK share also look on DeFi projects and like how can we build something which target what users, but without compromisation of like a real DeFi principles. So we're working quite actively towards making a transition as smooth and easy for Nasdaq.
Well, it's great to see. So I think, because within sort of, I come from the traditional world of finance. It's been 3 years now, so I think already I'm much more crypto. Because crypto is like dog year, so that's like 21 years of crypto. But wow. I think what's interesting, Bittrex, Bittrex Global, we're very much about I think there's two views in blockchain and crypto in general. Either you believe that, like you say, this is like financial services is a regulated industry. Just because you're applying a blockchain doesn't mean you fall outside of regulations of the industry. So we sort of have self-adopted. We're in Liechtenstein. We're under the Blockchain Act. We're fully regulated, et cetera. I think, as you know, a lot of players in the industry don't agree with that. And they view that this is a whole new world and you can do whatever you like. I personally don't think that's going to end well for a lot of these players. But, in the short run, certainly that seems to be the case. So, you sort of almost penalize yourself by self-adopting into the regulated bit. But I think it's the right thing to do for the long run. I think it's safer for your employees, for the investors. The hard work will pay off. So I think there's a lot of alignment between sort of what you're saying and how we operate our exchange. So I think moving on to the next question. So I guess you sort of touched on it a bit, but what does xSigma have that other projects don't? You have a lot of competitors in the DeFi space. So what's your value proposition or your value add?
Well, excellent question. So first of all, when I mentioned that xSigma is a corporation, but the solutions which we build are decentralized, it also happens to do with my personal life story, because I don't own almost no bank accounts. I shut down all my bank accounts. I have only 2 left, and I have less than 0.2% of my money actually in banks, everything in crypto. So there are quite, like when you mention there are like people who like follow and don't follow regulations. So my core beliefs that finance have to be completely decentralized and available for everyone. But I work for a corporation, which like a super centralized organization, which is like super regulated. What can you do as a least common denominator of these like two groups of core decentralized principle and a centralized corporation? And it happens to be that right now there are certain regulatory environment where it is possible by being completely centralized publicly organization still build a solution, open source solution, which can be run by everyone and do not break any laws. So I see that our competitive advantage of xSigma, that despite we build decentralized solution on a standard of like the all modern decentralized solution, we actually more decentralized than PancakeSwap, for example, largest like DEX on a Binance Smart Chain, because we don't have any migrator in our contract, which is like kind of able to physically take the liquidity if they misbehave, despite we kind of like publicly known people. So we do not have this success. And I feel what having advantage, like having basically best practice from both worlds, being transparent and kind of like a very legally compliant NASDAQ tradable entity, but building in the same time solutions which follow the like the most not strict, I would say, but the best practices of a DeFi, where D stands for decentralization, is what we can offer to the market. And what we do in a certain extent, like we just made our first baby steps. Bear in mind what we we deployed our contract, basically made a launch in 24 of February. So it was like very few time ago. So there is a lot of things to deliver. But so far, I see that bringing best practices from both worlds of a classical finance and a decentralized solutions might kind of like a shorter, smaller, narrower the gap between people from classical financial world like yourself and crypto anarchist like myself. So those solutions might bring basically some unique properties which aren't available for in our decentralized DeFi projects.
So I'm very offended. You're assuming I'm not a crypto anarchist just because I came from the traditional.
Sorry, I didn't mean that.
I think I am definitely a crypto anarchist. I think we're going to turn the traditional world on its head, but I don't.
I didn't say it's bad.
Yeah,
I didn't say it's bad. It's just like a different live use, I would say.
But I think that what's interesting, just because you turn the financial system on its head and banks and everything as we know it, I think money laundering and all these sorts of laws, like, if you're, just because you call it decentralized, if you facilitate money laundering, that's still going to be something that's going to be a problem, I think. And I think that's where I think that the regulators at some point will not tolerate a new technology that enables people just to get around certain types of regulation. So I think that's where it's going to be interesting to see how this all pans out. So unclear, but I think trying to merge DeFi with sort of the precepts of some sort of regulation, even if it's motivated by your ownership structure rather than a core belief, is probably strategically the right way to go if you want this to exist longer term. That's just my personal view, but we'll see how this all plays out. So I think the other thing that's very important to community members and ours in most community in crypto is security. So hacking, and other sorts of breaches. So how innovative, how will the innovative technologies and the smart contracts you've talked about at xSigma that you've adopted help the blockchain industry to work more transparently and securely against hackers?
Well, this is absolutely amazing question, taking into account what happens like last week. So for viewers who are not tracking like very closely the DeFi market, where it was a series of very massive DeFi hacks. Start from Uranium. After that, what was a project? I don't remember, but it was like $50 million hack with very like a peculiar, like a one-line mistake in a source code, which highlight question like how are you ensure the security of user funds? Like the classical approach to that is just like, well, you write your contracts, do like good work of testing, and after that hire auditors, right? Bigger name, the better. But it turned out, according to Rect, Like it's a very cool website which I recommend to everyone. They made analysis. It's rec.news, a leadership leaderboard, where more than half of a big like a DeFi hack happens on an audited contract. So it means the audit like doesn't really matter statistically speaking. It just happens to be your best practices, like how you develop this code. It's not sufficient just to rely on audits. It's probably good things to have as many audits and as many people who do peer review of your smart contract base, but absolutely insufficient. So what we do different, or at least try and do different in xSigma, is to having like a slightly different approach. Like we did audit as well. I wouldn't say it's the most like a biggest name in crypto, but still kind of well-known company. But what I personally feel that if we apply the best practices of a NASA development, this can help. I'll tell you why. It sounds very unusual. I mean, I just happened one of my best friends, like founder of a QuantStamp, Steven Stewart, and he introduced me back then. He doesn't work in a QuantStamp anymore, so no relation. But we spoke quite a lot with his friends about like how we can ensure the quality of smart contracts. Like, and is there any other similar industry? And turned out there is. It's an industry of making space probes. Because like one mistakes will cost you anything. And a famous mistake of a space exploration as well, where like one probe on Mars like didn't land and totally crashed because like different teams collaborate and they didn't agree on what kind of unit of measurement of wind speed will we use. So as I remember, one team was use international numbers like meters per second, and another one feet per seconds or something like that. And it just happens that to mitigate these mistakes, those space agencies use end programming. Basically, when they use a lot of different components and the system frameworks. But one of them, which I personally like, is end programming, where you set up a specification of a model. So you say, okay, this functionality should implement this method, and this method. And you can develop a test-driven development. But what happens next? You have several independent who do not communicate with each other as developers who develop the same code. And after that, you stress test what all implementation, the more the better. Sorry, but usually 3 is enough. We just started doing this approach. It's very costly, very resourceful, but it's what I personally like is the most secure approach. It's we try in my previous jobs in our companies. It turned out you're able to find like the most spectacular mistakes, which is like absolutely unclear how an audit might found you very smart brains. Just because everyone thinks around like same problem slightly different, might happen what implementation also different. And in the same inputs, it might give a slightly different result. And if it happens, you know what's something wrong. And this approach, I barely see in any development of a project. I've seen formal verification. MakerDAO, for example, made an absolutely amazing job by formally verify the multi-collateral stablecoin, but it's such like long process. It will take years, which we do not have right now. So what was xSigma? We trying to experiment like with this approach, but also do kind of smart contract audits, but like just to be clear and transparent with community. I personally believe that audit is not panacea. It's not 100% solution of a problem, because statistically speaking, it's really not that important, because both unaudited and audited contract get hacked. Also, there is an interesting development about a bounty program. So basically, before you release your smart contract in the public, in production, there are like set of different competition websites for cybersecurity specialists. And you put a bounty like $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, whomever find a mistake, and you just basically explain the rules. So this is how it works if you were able to do it. And competition between the security specialists, because like if you found a bug, you might think, okay, I'll just wouldn't disclose it and wait until a company would deploy this smart contract and gonna hack it for like millions of dollars. But because you'd never know what our security researchers would discover the same bug, it's actually from game theory point of view, it actually makes sense to disclose these foundings to receive this $30,000, because it's better than receive nothing because someone will report it. Overall, the complex of ensuring security of a smart contract is super complicated, very tedious process, which requires a lot of hard and kind of like underwater work. Because like when you deploy a contract, it's super simple, right? It's just like 200 lines when everyone can write. But all like 95% of work happens beyond these smart contract lines. It's how you ensure how you properly test, several implementation, different audits, different like bounties for hacker, etc., etc. So we're taking it very seriously, and so far, like nothing bad happens. So because we also used kind of like already proved, like as a core mechanism of a calculation of a mathematical formula for a stablecoin swap, we use a curve.defi components, and we built on top of that a cashback mechanism and a different governance structure and a different staking structure as well, like using also like proved components from MasterChef, and we deploying right now MasterChef version 2. So overall, like, yeah, quite a lot of work, but so far we're doing quite okay.
So it sounds like you're taking, I would summarize that you're taking security very seriously, and that's what users in the community should know. So the next question from the community is, what innovations has xSigma brought to the DeFi space? How is xSigma changing the new DeFi ecosystem, and what are the plans for the next few years?
Well, good question. So far, it's very important to understand we deploy only like MVP just to test what this approach would work at all, because like when you kind of publicly traded entity and lab build some kind of like DeFi solution, absolutely unclear whether someone would like to use it or not. So far, we prove what's it's possible. It's very small. And but even with a small amount of funds, we're able to make a traded volume in total, including like a staking, because everything paid a fee of 0.3%. If I'm not mistaken, $935 million, less than 3 months. So it's about 10 weeks. And this is a good number. It's almost $1 billion worth of trading volume. And it's proof for us what there is demand for such a solution. And so what we build next is we integrate in with the aggregator to have a cashback system. It's like our core kind of like core selling point, I would say, of the xSigma DEX. Very important to understand, xSigma has several projects. One of them is ongoing NFT platform with big kind of like basketball names, and like a kind of like a whole ecosystem of a project where we're trying to unite it with like one utility token. And those experiments show us what there is demand. So is our kind of innovation here is try to, well, it's a legal point of view, like right. First of all, but also from kind of a development point of view, utilize the already proven components to build something new. Because as far as I'm concerned, no one has successfully used a cashback system so far, and well, it's a kind of a good sign for us that, well, this is an interesting differentiator, which I personally like, because for me, it's stablecoin market is like super interested. I've worked in the stablecoin market since 2017, since like my personal project is stable unit, also like about the stablecoins. And I was in need to exchange like one stablecoin for another, but like with Ethereum transaction fees, it becomes like kind of, well, uncomfortable. So I have to use a centralized organization like yourself. But it's kind of, sometimes it's not very quick enough for my needs, because I have to move with money there, move with money. So if you trade, it's excellent place to be. But since I'm not a daily trader or any kind of like, I do investment just as my hobby, but the daily trading and something beyond my
day-to-day. It's a full-time job if you want to watch the crypto markets. Like there's no, if you like, I agree. You just put a few aside and just leave them there if you want to have a life.
Yeah. And for me, like, yeah, when I have to cash out some USDC, but like I have a position in DAI, so how I can swap like a couple of $1,000 without like paying like $100 like in a gas fee. So, right. Well, like xSigma is a good solution, which I personally use.
Great. So next question from the community. Staking is very popular in the crypto space. One user asked, are there any plans to implement a staking program in the xSigma ecosystem?
Oh, yes. Well, it is implemented from day zero. It's how we incentivize for liquidity providing. So basically, for newcomers like who might hear about staking but haven't used it yet. So it's super simple mechanism where you provide liquidity for a decentralized project such as decentralized exchange or a lending platform or anything like that. And when you provide this money, like basically you lend it out to a system, you receive a special token called a pool token. And after that, you just put this pool token in a smart contract, which kind of like every block calculates how much monetary reward will you receive. Well, we cannot say monetary, but basically you receive a SIG token, which is not security, which is like a utility token. And this incentivizes people to, give out liquidity for some period of time. So we already have it. However, what we do right now is deploying a new system of a smart contracts to do it more efficiently. Both from a gas price point of view and a usability point of view. Our community asks a lot about a compound because like right now, if you stake in, you have to take your money, stake it again. So it might be tedious. People complain a lot. So we are right now writing additional interface to do in one button, kind of like to take out rewards and stake it back into liquidity. So it would require a less transaction from our users. So it's already there. What we do have is, in addition to that, is we're adopting Master Chef contracts version 2, which has a joint farming. So it basically means that you can do partnership with our stablecoin projects, like who do liquidity providing kind of like incentive as well. So when people like press harvest, like this function involved in our function, you basically receive two types of tokens. One of them is SIG token and our one token of the stablecoin project. So we have to like approve it with the project as well, because it's not only a development process, but some sort of a political process. You have to like, it's interesting how we moved from a private, like a financial organization into some sort of a political field, but not in terms of like big politics, but in terms of you have to convince community that it's the right decision to execute. And like it's complicated like a topic, how we can approach, how we can articulate the benefits for a lot of very people, like very diverse backgrounds, which is like not development at all. It's like a totally different world.
It's amazing how, like, because in the banking world or the traditional finance world, they just sort of implement things and they tell the shareholders what they've done. Here, you actually have to get the buy-in from the users. So it's a very I agree with you. It's fascinating, and you have to, life is all politics. So I think it doesn't matter what you're doing. But it's interesting that you have to sort of adopt those types of techniques to convince your users or to try to influence them to move in the direction you want to go. So another user wants to know what your strategy is to attract new users and investors to your platform and how you intend to keep them long term.
Well, first of all, I'm unable to speak about investors and stuff like that. So very important to remember, I hire employee. It's not my company. So it's a question which I cannot answer. It's not my field of responsibility. And as for attracting users, we're trying to explore different channels. So our biggest client so far is 1inch, which happens to be my previous employer. But we explore in a different integration, which we weren't successful yet with aggregators, but we're moving towards, because our trading volume is already sufficient to make a good deal for companies. And I hope kind of our community might help us to convince Paraswap and our solutions like a Matcha to integrate it as a liquidity provider, because it would benefit everyone. Second one, we experimenting with different UI UX solutions. So NFT platform happens to be way more easier than we did with a DEX, because DEX proof, even though simple enough, is insufficiently simple for people for classical finance. And it's also ongoing process. It's quite a lot of learning curve for newcomers to DeFi to kind of get around all those MetaMasks, all this like tokens, all this what you have to pay for commission in a native token. I mean, it's not obvious for newcomers what you have to pay if you have a stablecoin DAI or USDT, but you have to pay commission not in these dollars, but in some kind of Ether. So why? It's kind of like a long, like a big learning curve. So we're trying to do some educational videos as well. Not that successful yet, but we're working to make it more accessible for a broader audience. And with new integration, like a kind of like an export of our system on a Binance Smart Chain, we discovering like kind of allow the absolutely amazing kind of set of new users who most of them are totally newcomers, unlike Ethereum. And for them, it's even more important to make it as simple as possible interface. So it's it's a beneficial process for us. After all, to make it as simple as possible, we expect more users. More users means like more liquidity. More liquidity means more fees. And we're taking these usability things very seriously. And as for marketing, I'm not a person who qualify to speak, but well, as we speak with you here, right? CTO of Bittrex, it's a kind of right step towards user acquisition, I think, right?
Yeah, I agree. Coming to Bittrex.
How many users you have on the platform?
We have. I mean, so we have. It depends on number. We don't disclose those numbers publicly, but we have well over 1 million registered users. So with the company, so. We're not the biggest, but in terms of for a regulated platform, with having well over sort of 300 tokens as well, I think that's sort of been our focus. So at any rate,
but it's still a lot. I mean, MetaMask
it's a lot.
Kind of like
if we were unregulated and didn't do KYC like some of our competitors who shall remain nameless, it's easier to attract users. But I don't think that those businesses are quite as long-term stable. So I think that's what I said at the beginning of the AMA. You sort of opt into you decide you wish to acknowledge there's regulation or you don't, and then you can kind of build your blockchain business around that. So I think one of the things, the next question, which I think is a really interesting topic, what do you think about the boom of the NFT and DeFi being linked together? It's causing so much interest in crypto right now. What do you think of that in general, and how does xSigma plan to take advantage of that sort of spike and boost in interest right now?
Well, it's a very complex topic about like market prediction, and it's very easy to explain what happens in the past. But whether this framework would have a prediction power, this is a real question. So, but I see on the crypto market like from four maybe different angles, different perspective. First of all, as a crypto market as a whole, right? So we have a $2.5 trillion worth of assets. Like this is a lot. This is insanely huge number. But as we speak for like we're moving towards NFT just by covering NFT, it's important to understand like more global trends. As we see, this market has some fundamental value proposition for a classical finance, because like as DeFi grew like in the last 15 months, almost like 100-fold, right? It was less than $1 billion last, I think, April. And we see that it's a lot of money, right? The DeFi just booming, crypto booming, but like real big money barely know what is this like DeFi thing. Like big institutional money, like someone, what, future of France, finance, what? So they have very, very little understanding what was DeFi things are and what are their advantages. People who try DeFi solution are very compelled to actually stay inside of DeFi, because how good is it? Like this kind of like burning feel of injustice, like when you use some kind of like a services and they do a lot of different censorship things, like a ban your access to bank account and stuff like that, a really strong driver for like early adopters like myself. But there are some advantages for any kind of users in DeFi, like no KYC is like maybe not the biggest advantage actually, like a lot of different benefits. And when the big money will come, they finally realize what, yeah, this things looks legit. This DeFi is not like just some kind of like, I don't know, like bull run trend which will disappear like a boom of ICO market. We will see correction for sure, but the fundamentals will stay. And when this correction will pass out, we will see absolutely insane growth rate. So I would say, I believe, because I cannot like kind of predict the future in absolutely reliable way, but I believe that DeFi would grow like 100 times from what is right now. How the crypto grew up from like barely known some Bitcoin to the $2.5 trillion market. And as for NFT, the question is it there to stay or not? Well, right now it's undeniably boom in a bull market. It's very overrated in a lot of different ways, but NFT is not a homogeneous kind of like a class of assets. There are like a lot of different types of NFT.
Well, NFT just means non-fungible token, so it's the opposite of Bitcoin. But so I think the current use case seems to be using NFTs for computer-generated art, but obviously NFT has unlimited uses. So
yes, but it's a common kind of misconception. It seems what the current use case is digital art. It's the most kind of like publicly known or noisy or vocal use case on a Twitter, for example, right? But if we speak statistically speaking, I don't know this year, but as of December 2020, numbers were a quarter all use cases, only quarter of all use cases, like let's me open numbers, just do not kind of misguide the users, were metaverse use cases. It's kind of like a decentralized, almost kind of real estate things in a virtual reality, which is might be stay, might not, I'm not personal user. 25% of art, 25% of gaming, and about 30%, 13% of each sport and collectibles, and utility only 4%. So, and also it's important to understand how small is it even, like it seems it's everywhere in terms of user base. If you speak about roughly 70 million crypto holders around the globe, the NFT holders are just merely about 70,000, right? 1,000 times less.
So crypto is still in its infancy. I think, and I agree with you, NFT is purely embryonic right now. So I think the press, the amount of media coverage versus the actual like number of holders and then this minuscule use case, I think there's a big, personally, I think there's a big future for NFT, but I don't think the current form is the future of NFT. I think there'll be much bigger use case like real estate or things that should be on the really inefficient old world industries that could use the blockchain to innovate, where you do need an NFT. I mean, that's where I think you'll see massive volumes. But again, that's
it's a technology, and I see it kind of resembles the growth of crypto before, because like crypto before was just for a fun thing, which is like a crypto kitties, right? In 2011, like
exactly,
Tamagotchi on a blockchain.
Exactly.
Yeah, and after that, like crypto found some legitimate use case. Like when WikiLeaks was banned from Visa and PayPal, like people start using Bitcoin. It's, I think, the first legit use case. So with NFT, we might see something like that, like very, very soon. Maybe digital art is none of them, maybe it is. We have a collectible market, existing market for a baseball cards. Like I assume you're an American or a British, right?
Market, so it's about right. So here the use case of NFT is a new class of art that never existed before. But what about applying it to the existing liquidity and the existing user? I think that's where I just think there's bigger potential growth. But it's anyway, it's drawing a lot of attention. It's great for the space. But I think buyer always should be careful with what, don't just buy off the hype. Make sure you do your work and due diligence.
Well, it's very, like, I would disagree here. So you see it from investment perspective. I don't see the NFT as necessary an investment matter. So a lot of those use cases currently is support your current favorite content creator. It's like a Patreon in a sense. You don't kind of buy this art in a hope to sell it more expensive. I mean, there are a lot of users who do.
You're assuming that's not why people are buying it. So I agree. You're right. That's how you should approach it. But I think you have a lot of users who are probably seeing the press. They're seeing the crazy numbers being achieved, and the money will always attract the press and potential people. So unfortunately, I do think some people are probably not investing for the reasons you've thought. I agree with you. It's changed the model. It's like the new patronage. It's like, which is a very old concept.
Honestly, I made quite a good money to invest in an NFT platform myself. So I didn't know what like NFT should I buy. I didn't understand how I can sell it.
You just threw some money at
the market. Yeah, and I just like bought tokens. It was like very good investment for me, but like not investment advice of nothing related to xSigma. It was different platform, but just I personally did this investment. But I don't know per se what was use cases of those NFT tokens which this platform was selling. It's still selling it. So there are different incentive to buy it, and I see like I would personally totally buy NFT from my favorite content creators. Like I like some YouTubers. There is a Finematic, absolutely brilliant channel on YouTube about DeFi. I love it a lot. Hopefully we'll just share some topics with them like one day. But so far, like if it would bring NFT, I would buy like without blinking. So I see it as a legitimate tool, and the question is like, do you use this tool in the right direction for the right purposes?
Right. Great. And so the last question from our community is many members have inquired about how they can support your project. So do you have an ambassador program or other incentives for your token holders?
And this is kind of like a little, I guess, weak point of a big corporation. I try to convince a lot of time the board to do that because our community is amazing. There are so many like smart folks who express in not only concern but like a support in our like community chat. And I spoke with them, some of them in private, and I was amazed how knowledgeable those people. And it would be absolutely terrific for us to do some kind of like a community incentive program, for example, to support us to discover new partners, to convince new partners, to do some like promotion on the social networks, to do like what you call ambassador. I don't know like whether the right word, but kind of like people who would say that, you know, this exists an alternative for current stablecoin platforms, right? And this is xSigma, and some conversation in the different chats. Whatever you call those people, we are very, very neat of them, and we're happy to support them in any way we can. So this was our weak point, and I think the board made a good kind of takeaway from not actively engaging community. I'm very looking forward different incentive programs for our dear community members who support us through all this like a time, and were very vocal in our successful work and also in our mistakes. We also appreciate a lot of feedback from these people. It would be absolutely amazing if we can continue to work with them in a more broader spectrum, you know, of involvement.
Great. So I think that's all the questions for the community. I think for the last thing, maybe before we wrap things up, do you want to talk a bit about the stablecoin market in general, or any problems with the market, just sort of your views on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's why I actually decide to kind of build these things for xSigma. So stablecoin is a big thing. Like, as I mentioned, the crypto market is a $2.5 trillion. It's a massive, it's the biggest, like bigger than budget of Russia. It's an insane amount of capital. And how much do you think the amount of this like capital in percent are stable coins or crypto dollars? Do you have a guess, Steven?
In terms of what percentage of the crypto markets in stable coins?
Yeah,
I don't think I know how big Tether is, so I would say it's probably relatively small percentage. I'd say it's like 5%, 10% maybe max. Tell me the number.
10% maybe max, but how much do you feel would be comfortable for a crypto market to properly hedge during some correction of market?
Oh, it should be much bigger. I think the percentage of stablecoin is way too small for the size of this market. I mean, because it's basically all in speculative assets. There's nothing that's
and I share the sentiment, but actually you were kind of wrong, because it's less than 3% of the crypto market are in stablecoins. This is nothing.
It's tiny, right? So I mean, it's nothing. It should be bigger. I think it's too small.
And it would be bigger. I mean, if you see how USDT grow, it's like shoot to the moon. And like I expect that maybe in the following 12 months we will see like strong growth rate, like maybe X3, something like that. So it should be at least like $150, $180 billion.
But do you think it's going to be tokens like Tether, or do you think it'll be new coins that come into the market?
And here's a very important thing. Like we say, how the growth rate across the assets of stable coins happens to be. So the biggest like a growth factor happens to be in USDT. USDC, BUSD. So all these projects have one thing in common, except from big exchanges.
USD. That's what they all have in common, basically.
Well, this is yes, but so is our stable coins. But no, a part of this is they are not only regulated but also frozenable. Like they have a built-in feature to freeze any stable coin, any wallet at will in any moment of time. As a matter of fact, USDT already froze 400 addresses blacklisted.
And like, what does that mean? To explain that to our listeners. So Tether can freeze you.
Yes. You have a money in your wallet. Let's say I wouldn't speculate on use cases. I'm probably unable to do it legally, but there are some type of assets which deemed to be toxic, maybe connected with some hostile jurisdiction like Iran, right? No, hostile from United States point of view, no way to try to offense like Iranian people, great country. But there are some regulatory bodies who think that some addresses belong to people who do not have a right to possess money in these systems. Whatever reason, like you can do attack, you can just send this toxic money in a wallet of some hedge fund. And like you one day wake up and would realize what your 100 mil like worth of USDT are frozen, gone, like nothing. So if you keep like $10,000 or $100K of your personal possession, this is like a very strong strike, right? But it's not end of the world for most of people. You will earn more perhaps. But if it's 100 mil, especially someone else's money, it might be life-threatening for you in a lot of different jurisdictions. And when this it's kind of like part of a global censorship movement. It happens not only in decentralized assets, well, centralized kind of like blockchain assets. It happens in classical finance. It happens in social media. Like I got blocked on Facebook. I'm former engineer on Facebook. I haven't posted anything. It's just like robot mistake. I mean, even like American president got blocked like on this Facebook, Twitter. No way I support and dissupport him. It's not a question here. But it's very important. It's a kind of like well-known political figure and a private organization get like decide.
I think everyone, I mean, crypto is totally, I think, it's everyone's against censorship of any kind. I mean, it's
but being against and some actions are different things. I mean, I support a lot of different kind of movements, peaceful and horrible, but what have I personally done? I mean, I do support some politicians like in Russia and stuff like that as much as I can, but like my impact is relatively small. In a crypto, you vote with your dollar. Like if you don't agree with a project philosophy, with a project like how they handle, you just move from this project, from this class of, from this asset to another. And if it happens that USDT might freeze too much wallets, where it would be some kind of like a panic in the market, where all this $150 expected billion would go? They would go and die? Well, some of it would go and die.
What's the new innovation, or what do you think the stablecoin market's going to do to address that?
Well, there would be some very cool project. Like DAI is absolutely brilliant project. It's super stable. It's very decentralized, but it has very serious flaw. It's unscalable. It just doesn't scale because it's capital inefficient. Like in order to create DAI, for some people who don't know what DAI, it's like $1 on a blockchain, but backed by Ether and our type of different assets. So it's kind of like decentralized bank in a sense. And while being absolutely amazing stablecoin, there is not that much good incentive to create it. So the only way we can create DAI is actually borrow by some percent, and not just borrow. You have to put more collateral, like twice more collateral to borrow like this DAI. If you borrow $1,000 DAI, you have to put at least like $1,500 worth of Ether, but actually more because of volatility. And like this collateral just stay idling in these smart contracts doing nothing and doesn't earn any interest. So I foresee there would be new systems which solve this capital inefficiency of DAI problem, which brings like both decentralization and censorship resistant properties of DAI, but at the same time they would be scalable, like not maybe as much as USDT, but sufficiently scale to absorb this buying pressure in a case of some market, I wouldn't say disaster, but like kind of like market movements towards diversification. Because right now stablecoin market is like almost all of like USDT. But in any of these cases, we will see increased movement from one stablecoin to another stablecoin. And I would see that stablecoin revenue, stablecoin trading volume would just like skyrocket. It's already like USDT has a more trading volume than Bitcoin and pretty much anything else in the market. And with all this set of properties of USDT, I mean, I'm kind of member of a centralized organization like xSigma, but we build in decentralized solutions. And I myself very, very critical towards USDT. I think what they're doing is endanger the whole crypto market. I mean, we haven't passed single audit. Like it's some assets which I not personally believe, but it's what it is right now. Market all of this. So I expect when people would realize that more and more movement from USDT would move towards different solutions. Some of them maybe in another centralized asset like USDT, but more and more would come for decentralized like a DAI and other alternative, scalable alternative as DAI. It's where the Sigma comes to play. It's an alternative for existing solutions as well. So people have an option to choose, and they would expect like a super increased trading volume in between different type of stablecoins in the following years.
Interesting. Well, I think again, super interesting talking to you. I think we could go on all day, but I don't think we have the time for that, unfortunately. But thanks for joining us, Alex, on this AMA. Really excited about our partnership with xSigma. If our listeners want to learn more about xSigma, please go to xsigma.fi, which is xsigma.fi. Thank you again, Alex.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stefan, for having me. And well, thank you every listener who happened to not a viewer, perhaps who happened to find time to listen to our conversation.